Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today, we'll explore something often ignored but crucial to understanding why humans sometimes act in ways that seem dark or even destructive. This is about the primal instincts within us, those ancient parts of the brain that guide behavior in ways we might not fully realize. Psychology tells us that much of our behavior stems from survival mechanisms hardwired into our brain millions of years ago. These instincts were essential when humans lived in harsh, dangerous environments where threats came from predators, rival tribes, or scarcity of resources. Deep inside our brain lies the limbic system, a group of structures responsible for managing emotions, motivation, and survival drives. One of its main parts is the amygdala, which acts like an alarm system, detecting threats and triggering fight, flight, or freeze responses. When the amygdala senses danger, it floods the body with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. These chemicals prepare us to act quickly, to defend ourselves or escape harm. This response was vital for survival in the past. But today, the same reaction can lead to aggression or anxiety in situations that aren't physically dangerous, like a stressful conversation or a difficult deadline. This primal brain doesn't always consider the consequences of its actions. It's focused on immediate survival and self-preservation. This is why sometimes people lash out in anger or act selfishly, not because they want to harm others, but because their brain interprets a situation as threatening. This dark side of human behavior is, in many ways, an evolutionary artifact. It exists because it once kept us alive. Moreover, aggression, which is often seen as a negative behavior, has roots in these primal instincts. Aggression helped early humans compete for food, protect their families, and establish social hierarchies. But aggression is not just physical violence. It can be verbal, emotional, or even passive. Understanding that aggression is biologically rooted helps us realize it's not always a conscious choice, but a reaction tied to survival instincts. This insight is crucial in psychology because it encourages empathy and effective strategies for managing conflict rather than simple condemnation. Fear is another primal emotion that plays a huge role in human behavior. It can cause people to act in ways that seem irrational or harmful to others. Fear of rejection, failure, or loss can push someone to lie, cheat, or manipulate. Again, this is the brain trying to protect itself from perceived threats, whether real or imagined. This highlights how much our behavior is shaped by internal states we might not fully control. But it's not only about defense. Primal instincts also drive our desires for food, sex, safety, and social connection. These drives influence our decisions and shape our personalities. When these needs are unmet or threatened, it can lead to frustration, jealousy, or even cruelty. Psychology explains that understanding these basic drives helps us see the roots of some darker behaviors, not as signs of inherent evil, but as expressions of unmet survival needs. At the same time, modern humans have developed the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, which allows us to think critically, plan, and control impulses. This part of the brain helps us regulate primal instincts and make choices aligned with social norms and morals. The struggle between the primal brain and the rational mind is a constant battle within us. Sometimes the primal brain takes over in moments of stress or fear, revealing the dark side of human nature. Recognizing the role of primal instincts in human behavior is empowering. It helps us understand that some behaviors are automatic responses rather than deliberate actions. This awareness allows psychologists, educators, and caregivers to develop interventions that calm the primal brain through mindfulness, therapy, or safe environments, helping people respond more thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. In summary, the dark side of human behavior is deeply connected to our primal brain and survival instincts. These instincts served our ancestors well and remain embedded in us today. They can lead to aggression, fear-driven actions, and selfishness when triggered, but they also remind us of the complex biological roots of behavior. By understanding these primal forces, psychology offers a path toward compassion and control, helping us navigate our darker impulses and choose better ways to interact with the world and each other. Aggression is one of the most complex behaviors studied in psychology because it doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it's loud and explosive, yelling, fighting, breaking things. Other times, it's quiet and passive, giving someone silent treatment, spreading rumors, or manipulating. But what drives people to become aggressive in the first place? Psychology tells us that aggression is rarely random. It often comes from a mixture of internal emotions and external triggers that build up over time. The key is understanding where it starts. One of the major factors behind aggression is frustration. When a person is blocked from achieving something they want or need, whether it's love, respect, power, or even basic resources, that frustration can build into anger. And if that anger is not expressed in healthy ways, it can become aggression. This is known as the frustration-aggression hypothesis, which suggests that when people feel powerless or cornered, they often lash out to regain control. Imagine someone constantly disrespected at work, ignored at home, and struggling financially. Over time, that internal pressure may come out as aggression, not because the person is evil, but because they feel emotionally trapped. Another reason people become aggressive is due to learned behavior. From childhood, we observe how others around us handle conflict. If a child grows up in a home where arguments are solved through shouting or physical violence, they may begin to see aggression as a normal reaction. The same applies to what we consume in media. Studies have shown that repeated exposure to violent movies, video games, or toxic social environments can desensitize the brain, making people less sensitive to the harm aggression causes. This doesn't mean media alone causes violence, but when combined with stress, trauma, or emotional instability, it can lower the threshold for aggressive behavior. Biology also plays a role. Certain brain structures, such as the amygdala, help regulate fear and aggression. When this part of the brain is overactive or not functioning properly, it can lead to more impulsive or aggressive reactions. Similarly, low levels of serotonin, a brain chemical involved in mood regulation, have been linked to increased aggression and irritability. This means that sometimes the roots of aggression go deeper than personality or choice. They can be connected to neurochemical imbalances that affect emotional control. Psychologists also study situational triggers. These are external conditions that push someone toward aggression. Crowded spaces, loud environments, physical discomfort, alcohol use, humiliation, or even hot weather can raise the likelihood of someone acting aggressively. In such moments, people often don't realize what's happening. They feel overwhelmed or attacked and react without thinking. This is why some aggressive behavior can seem out of character. It's not that the person planned it. It's that their emotional threshold was crossed. An important aspect of aggression is perceived threat. When someone believes their identity, values, or self-image is being threatened, they may respond with defensive aggression. This is common in relationships or situations involving pride or ego. A simple insult or rejection can feel like a deep wound to someone who already carries inner pain or insecurity. In these cases, the aggression is not about the person in front of them. It's about unresolved emotions from the past that never got healed. But here's what's hopeful. Aggression is not uncontrollable. Through therapy, education, and self-awareness, people can learn to recognize their emotional triggers, express frustration in healthier ways, and break the cycle of violence. Cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, teaches people how to challenge irrational thoughts, manage emotional reactions, and develop coping skills to deal with anger. Emotional regulation is a skill, not something you're born with, but something you can build with practice. In conclusion, aggression is not just about being bad or angry. It's about what lies underneath: unmet needs, emotional wounds, distorted thinking, or even biological vulnerabilities. When we understand these layers, we don't just reduce violence. We create a world where people can process pain without passing it on. Deception is one of the most powerful and dangerous tools in human behavior. And psychology helps us understand exactly why people lie, manipulate, or play mind games. It begins with a simple truth. Human beings are social creatures. And in every social structure, whether it's family, friendship, or workplace, people want to gain something: acceptance, power, protection, attention, or influence. Sometimes, when people don't feel strong enough to get these things honestly, they turn to manipulation. It becomes a shortcut, a way to survive, win, or maintain control without being seen for who they really are. Not all lies are equal. There are lies told to protect someone, called white lies, and there are lies told to protect a liar. These are defensive lies, used to avoid blame or punishment. But then there are strategic lies, lies told to gain power, dominate, or confuse others. This kind of deception is often calculated and cold. It doesn't happen by accident. The person doing it often understands human behavior deeply. They know what others want to hear, how to twist the truth just enough to stay believable, and how to control emotions with words. One of the most common forms of manipulation is gaslighting, a term from psychology that describes when someone makes you doubt your reality. A gaslighter may tell you, "That never happened," or "You're being too sensitive," even when you know the truth. Over time, this chips away at your self-confidence and makes you dependent on the manipulator for a sense of reality. It's a psychological game of power, and it's used in abusive relationships, toxic friendships, even professional environments. What's scary is that many manipulators don't look dangerous. They often seem charming, intelligent, and even caring. That's because manipulation works best when it's hidden under the mask of kindness. People who manipulate are often experts at reading emotions. They know how to use guilt, fear, flattery, or silence to create confusion and keep others off balance. In psychological terms, this is called emotional manipulation, using feelings not to connect but to control. There's also the concept of the dark triad in psychology, 3 traits that often exist in people who are experts at deception: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Narcissists crave admiration and believe they're superior. Machiavellians are strategic, cold, and willing to deceive if it benefits them. Psychopaths lack empathy and can hurt others without guilt. A person doesn't need all 3 traits to be manipulative. Even one can cause damage. These traits can show up in personal relationships, business leaders, or even people in positions of power who use charm and deceit to influence others while hiding their real intentions. But not all manipulation is dramatic or extreme. Sometimes it's quiet. A friend who always makes you feel guilty for saying no. A partner who plays the victim every time you bring up your needs. A coworker who takes credit for your work but compliments you just enough to avoid confrontation. These are subtle forms of control, and they are just as damaging over time. Psychology teaches us that people often manipulate because they are afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of not being enough, afraid of losing power. For them, manipulation becomes a defense mechanism. It's how they protect themselves from emotional pain. But even if the roots are understandable, the behavior is still harmful because it robs others of their freedom, their confidence, and their ability to think clearly. The good news is that awareness breaks the cycle. Once people learn how to spot manipulation in their relationships or even in themselves, they can start setting boundaries. Emotional intelligence, self-respect, and strong communication skills are the antidotes to psychological control. And for those who struggle with manipulative tendencies, therapy can help uncover the deeper fears behind those behaviors and build healthier ways of relating. In the end, the study of deception and manipulation isn't about pointing fingers. It's about understanding how power works in human interaction and how we can create relationships built on honesty, respect, and emotional safety rather than fear and control. One of the most unsettling discoveries in psychology is that ordinary people who consider themselves kind, honest, and ethical, are capable of committing harmful or even horrific acts under certain conditions. This doesn't always happen because someone suddenly becomes evil. Instead, it often begins when they mentally disconnect their actions from their moral beliefs. This psychological process is known as moral disengagement, and it explains how people could do bad things while still thinking of themselves as good. Humans like to believe in their own goodness. It gives them a sense of identity and self-respect. But when a situation arises where doing the right thing feels risky, costly, or uncomfortable, people often face an inner conflict. That conflict between what they believe and what they're doing causes what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, a mental discomfort. To reduce that discomfort, the mind finds ways to justify the behavior. The action stays the same, but the person's thinking around it shifts, making it seem acceptable or necessary. There are several psychological strategies people use to disengage morally. One of the most common is moral justification. This is when someone convinces themselves that their harmful behavior serves a higher purpose. For example, someone might say, "I had to lie. It was for their own good," or "I cheated because the system is already unfair." The behavior itself doesn't change, but is framed in a way that makes the person feel noble or heroic, even when their actions cause harm. Another way people disengage is by minimizing personal responsibility. In group settings, individuals often feel less accountable for their actions because they're just following orders or doing what everyone else was doing. This is especially visible in institutions or large systems, like the military, corporations, or even school bullying, where no single person feels fully responsible. The responsibility is spread so thin that no one feels guilty, even when serious damage is done. A third method is dehumanization, reducing others to something less than human. When people start to see others as objects, numbers, or categories, it becomes easier to treat them badly. Language plays a big role here. Terms like them, criminals, losers, or even racial or political slurs create distance between people. The more different someone seems from us, the easier it becomes to justify unfair treatment. This is a dangerous process, and history shows us that many atrocities, from wars to genocides, began with this exact type of moral disengagement. Displacement of responsibility is also common. People often shift the blame for their behavior onto someone else, a leader, a boss, a partner, saying things like, "They made me do it," or "I had no choice." This allows people to act in ways they'd normally find unacceptable because they convince themselves they're not truly in control. Another form is comparing one's behavior to something worse, a strategy called advantageous comparison. For example, someone might say, "At least I didn't hit them," or "It's not as bad as what others do." This mental comparison makes their own actions feel small and harmless, in contrast to more extreme behavior, even if what they did was still wrong. Psychology helps us see that these aren't rare behaviors. Most people, at some point in life, engage in small forms of moral disengagement, telling half-truths, blaming others, staying silent in the face of injustice. It doesn't mean they're evil. It means they're human. But being aware of these patterns is the first step to resisting them. What's powerful is that moral awareness can be trained. When people reflect on their values, stay accountable for their actions, and resist the urge to justify wrongdoing, they build moral resilience. They begin to act not just based on rules or consequences, but on empathy and integrity. Understanding moral disengagement isn't about judging others. It's about recognizing the subtle ways we all protect our self-image at the cost of doing what's right, and how we can build the courage to stay aligned with our values, even when it's uncomfortable. In conclusion, understanding the dark side of human behavior is not about labeling people as simply good or bad. Psychology shows us that beneath the surface of every individual lies a complex mix of instincts, fears, desires, and social pressures that can lead to harmful actions. Whether it's aggression fueled by our primal brain, manipulation used as a tool for control, or moral disengagement that allows good people to do bad things, these behaviors are part of the human experience. By shining a light on these hidden mechanisms, psychology empowers us to recognize these patterns in ourselves and others. This awareness is crucial, not to excuse harmful actions, but to prevent them, promote empathy, and build healthier relationships and societies. Only by confronting the uncomfortable truths about human nature can we hope to grow beyond them and create a world where kindness, honesty, and respect truly prevail.